Welcome. My name is Lloyd Borrell. I'm your host. Today, I'm thrilled to have as my guest Dr. Eva Detko. Dr. Eva has studied natural medicine and the human mind for 20 years. She successfully recovered from chronic fatigue syndrome and reversed Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And now she's passionate about helping clients with autoimmune disorders. Dr. Eva has an extensive knowledge and experience in the field of human physiology, biochemistry, and nutritional sciences. And she uses a wide range of mind-transforming tools and modalities in her work. Dr. Eva, welcome to the EMF Health Summit.
Hello, hi everybody. Thanks for having me. Absolutely super excited for this conversation because we are going to tackle quite an important topic. So yes, great. Let's do it.
So I know you work with clients in many different ways on the nutritional level and on this level of the mind particularly. But I just like to, ask you how EMFs came into your life, electromagnetic fields. How did they come into your life? When did you discover these dangers and hear about these phenomena?
Well, actually, as you know, Lloyd, I've been in this industry. Well, by this industry, I mean the field of natural medicine for over 20 years. And so really, I was aware of the dangers of EMFs quite early on in my career, really before the bulk of all the research that came out. And in a way, I look at health in a really integrated way. And what I mean by that is I look at the physical and the biochemistry, but I also look at the mental, spiritual, and obviously emotional. But as well as that, I look at the energetic part of health. So when you really look at the human body and human health as a whole in that way, then you quickly realize that we are very sort of highly sensitive devices, really, and we are electromagnetic. So thinking about all this technology that surrounds us and all those powerful devices, if we can be affected by the food we eat on the energetic level and by the water we drink, and people around us, then how can we not be affected by all this powerful technology that we're surrounding ourselves with? So really, to me, that's intuitive. It's always made sense. But I was actually, I sort of experienced it firsthand from my health perspective when I was diagnosed with ME, and I was very ill at some point. That was a very long time ago. And it wasn't really, EMFs were not the main trigger for me like they were for you. But at that time, I definitely noticed that whenever I was, at the beginning, I couldn't even get out of bed. So I wasn't really doing any work or anything like that. A few months into it, when I was able to do a couple of hours of work here and there, I actually noticed the impact of being in front of a computer and being sort of bombarded with the EMFs from that. And also whenever I was talking on the phone, mobile phone, I was sort of noticing that my energy levels were even worse. Now, these days, like I said, that was a long time ago. I recovered from that fully. I also had Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is autoimmune disease. That's all good. I'm actually in a very good state of health right now. I've worked very hard to be where I am, and it is fantastic. And I'm in very good physical shape. I exercise every day. But even today, my work requires me to spend long hours in front of a computer. Unfortunately, at the moment, that's how it is. And the difference between me doing that versus when I go away and I'm just walking all day long or cycling, or we basically outside interacting with nature, I am highly sort of in tune. My body, I read it very well because I had to learn that over the years in order to get well. And there's definitely a difference. There's always a difference between being in the sort of great outdoors, because that's what both my husband and I are into. So when we go away on holidays, we really minimize the exposure EMF exposure. But obviously when I'm at home and when I'm working, I EMF sort of proof my home as much as possible. But obviously you can't really, if you're sitting in front of the computer all day long, you're going to have those effects. And there is a difference. There's definitely a difference. And that's even from this is coming from the healthy person. So in the disease state, those differences were more pronounced perhaps than they are now, but I am still aware of the difference. So yeah, for sure that I do totally believe that we know from research that we are all affected by it.
So you have this this electrical sensitivity, we can call it, because everybody's got it anyway. That's what the studies are telling us. Everybody is electrically sensitive. It's just some are hypersensitive and very symptomatic, and others are not. But it's affecting all of us. So I'd like to talk about the role of the mind in perpetuating and perhaps even creating disease, or disease as I like to call it. So perhaps we could talk about that. And it is a bit of it's a subject which is full of minefields, I feel, or it's a sensitive subject, can I say, because it's like we don't want to think that if there's something wrong with us, that, how people go, oh, it's all in the mind, as if it's not real, So perhaps you could talk to that.
I'm going to actually, before I answer that question, very excellent question, very important, I'm actually just going to go back a second to people on medication. I just want to say that sometimes when symptoms are severe, particularly when I'm talking from my perspective, which is working with people with autoimmunity, when symptoms are severe, sometimes you need to, for a period of time, you need to take the medication, because before you make all the changes, you need that support, and that's fine. So I'm not advocating that people just ditch all the meds. Absolutely not. This needs to be obviously done responsibly. But all I'm saying is that that's not the ultimate solution, but it may provide that little bit of support at the beginning for some people, and that is okay. But what people should aim for is to get to the root cause so that they can get off the medication. That's just wanted to clarify that.
Absolutely, yeah. So we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There is a place for it, for this medication, but it's not long term. It's not living on this stuff which is suppressing your symptoms. So then this amazing thing, the mind, and it can do all these things, but it's like sometimes it seems as though it's working against you. That's what we're saying here, isn't it? When we're going into these, and there's Annie Hopper, which has done quite a bit of work on this by observing people that are OCD, and she developed a retraining system to enable people to claim back their health, win back their health, recover. So we know the mind is so powerful, and we can do things with it. So perhaps you could talk to that.
So we're talking about root cause just a moment ago, obviously going into that. So what I want people to understand also is that when you have, you mentioned OCD, so that would be, a symptom, right, of sorts. Well, it is actually, and there will be a reason why this is happening. So when you have physical symptoms, that's one thing. But when you have all of those mental, emotional symptoms, such as fears, anxieties, obsessive behaviors, all sorts of undesirable behaviors that you may think, this is really interfering with my life. Why is my mind making me do that?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but to make this relevant to EMFs, it could be the fear of that cell tower. It could be the fear of people using a cell phone next to you, yeah?
Exactly. So, but there is obviously there's going to be a good reason. So, for instance, if somebody is constantly on edge and anxious because they're thinking, is it making me sicker? Is it going to cause me big problems down the line, like cancer or whatever else? And there's that constant anxiety there. Then, of course, there is a reason for it. And the reason is obviously, this is out of our control, the cell tower itself. But it's also our internal responses and the fact that we may be, maybe we had some bad experiences in our early years, whereby, maybe somebody in the family got sick and it got really bad, and we just kind of fearful of even contemplating that this could be happening to us. But what I'm saying is there's always a reason. So we need to get to the root cause. So I don't want people to be beating themselves up and thinking that they're crazy, that they're not in control of themselves, and they're somehow deficient, there's something fundamentally wrong with them, because that is oftentimes where people can go when they don't really understand their own emotional responses and behaviors. But there's biology behind it, and there's reasons behind it, and there could be early trauma that you may not even remember that you had, and all of that. So it needs you to be thinking that all of those things are also symptoms, and there is a root cause. And again, if you uncover the root cause and you deal with the root cause, then those symptoms will also go away. So talking about the mind perpetuating the disease state. People may be aware of the limbic system and the amygdala in particular, the part of the brain that actually is associated with key functions such as emotions, memories, and also stimulation or arousal. Now, that part of the brain categorizes experiences into either pleasant or unpleasant. So we will have that internal perception based on various experiences that we've had early in our lives, our belief system, etc. And so when something is perceived as unpleasant, then the next thing that happens is this whole cascade of hormones that follows, and people know this as fight or flight or freeze response, right? But then if something is perceived as pleasant, then obviously the opposite, the parasympathetic nervous system is activated, and we've got the rest, digest, and heal response being activated. Why is that relevant and why that can be a problem is that if the stress response is acute, it's actually a healthy thing. We've evolved this way. This is exactly what we meant to do. If we in danger, we meant to fight it or run away from it, or in case of some animals, they'll freeze it and they just have this freeze state and they hope that the predator will go away. So we obviously had that as well. But the point being is that obviously, if that's a one-off response and then the stressor goes away, example could be a job interview, for instance. Always job interview. Well, for some people that may be an ongoing stressor, but for most people, it'll be, hey, I'm a bit anxious, maybe excited anxious, or maybe scared anxious. But once the interview is finished, my body comes right down because I'm going down the pub with my mates for a drink, and then I'm happy. Everything's pleasant, right? So therefore, it's an acute response. That's perfectly healthy for a human being. So this is nothing to freak out about. When it starts being a problem is when those responses turn chronic. And the reason why that is a problem is because when I just mentioned that when you kind of activate and then you return to baseline, that's a normal thing, and that's great. And we just go through those, every now and again. Fine. But when we in the chronic state of activation, when we have chronic fears, chronic anxieties, chronic guilt, chronic shame, poor relationship with self, we always sort of tell ourselves that we're too fat, too thin, too poor, too wealthy, whatever, we're unhappy about who we are in general, then that is something that is there. It's there all the time. And then, of course, on top of that, we have all sorts of things like financial stresses and kids. We're always stressed about our kids and all of that sort of thing. So when you have that constant activation, you never return back to baseline. So what results is that your body is constantly flooded with those stress hormones. They never quite subside to the healthy levels. And then, of course, you've got this, the tissues become insensitive to those hormones because they're always there. So the body basically stops responding properly. On top of that, chronic cortisol exposure. Cortisol is a great hormone because it helps us get the resources going. When we're running away from danger, cortisol is the hormone that's going to make sure that the glucose is available for the body to utilize in order to be able to produce enough energy to run away. So this is important. But when there's too much of it and it's there all the time, it actually starts damaging tissues, and we have all sorts of problems to do with that. It's important to recognize also that chronic stress is not just emotional stress to the body. Whether it's chemical stress, whether it's stress to do with EMF exposure, whether it's stress to do with the fact that you had a car accident and you never went to a chiropractor and your spine is all messed up, and it's just interfering with all sorts of things in the body, whether it's actually emotional, the body will react the same way. It will react the same way. So if you think about everyday lives that we live in the Western world, right? We have toxins in our environment. We've got toxins in our food. We've got toxins in our air. We've got toxins in our water. So already chronic chemical stress, right? Then we've got all these cell towers and mobile phones and all of that. Constant chronic stress from that. And then, of course, we've got this big umbrella and big box of things. When we sort of open that out, there's so much that comes out, that is the emotional. It's important to understand that the problem that we have these days is that we bombard it with EMS all the time, but we also have a lot of internal stress, and we also have a lot of chemical stress, and so on and so on. And this is what overloads the body. And when we're talking about electromagnetic hypersensitivity, it's not just EMF that have caused you to be sick. There's going to be other things that are going on in your environment and perhaps internally that they've weakened the body enough over the years that suddenly you've got this hypersensitivity, and something that was affecting you at some level because it affects all of us is now affecting you to the point that you cannot function. So why the mind can perpetuate this is because there are so many different sources of what I call emotional toxicity. And as we said, that directly links to putting that pressure on the nervous system and that whole cascade of hormones that follows, and therefore, causing those disease states. Because as we know, every single chronic illness pretty much is linked to stress. But when we're talking about stress, people just don't think deep enough. People think that stress is stressing about money or the relationship. There is so much more than that to it than that. And so I want people to understand that the ACEs studies that have been done, the adverse childhood experiences studies, have linked emotional trauma, early trauma in particular, to all sorts of chronic diseases. It's actually really staggering what those figures are. And sometimes having two ACEs could increase the risk of having something sort of 5-fold, 7-fold, 10-fold. It's crazy. So the problem is that, of course, when we're talking about emotional trauma, we've all had something in our childhood because we develop the way we develop, and our brain develops in a certain way whereby we, for the first few years of our lives, we don't have the ability to rationally sort of step back from the situation and rationally assess what's going on because we haven't developed that yet. We're taking everything at face value, and oftentimes things that are actually well-intended are misinterpreted and hurt us and hurt our feelings and cause us all sorts of negative emotions. So it's not necessarily what happens, it's the internal response to what happens. Because as we know, there could be two people going through exact same thing, and one person will be absolutely fine because their interpretation was they either shrugged it off or it was even positive, and the other person could be completely traumatized by it. So, and sometimes people think of trauma as just in terms of PTSD. But I'm telling you this, I've been working with this for a very long time. Sometimes a puppy could look at you the wrong way at the wrong time when you're a child, and that could traumatize you. It could be, we can't say, oh, you know what, this is trivial, this can't be what what affects a child, because you really don't know what the response is, and the timing is important. Also, there's all sorts of factors that come into it, and to be honest, there is not a single person on this planet who can go through their childhood, no matter how loving their environment and their family that they're growing up in, and not experience some level of trauma. It's almost impossible, because there's obviously things like attachment trauma, developmental trauma, intergenerational trauma. There's just so many different things. And so, of course, on top of that, we've got all the social engineering that goes on, right? So girls and boys, from the beginning, girls are expected to do certain things and behave in a certain way and believe in certain things, and boys likewise in various other things. And then, of course, they develop based on that the whole entire belief system and core values develop. And so somebody could become a really fearful and anxious person who just doesn't feel good enough, just purely because something was, repeatedly said to them as a child, and they interpreted it that means I'm not lovable, that means I'm not good enough. Now, they will go through their entire lives believing that. They will create the world around them based on that. It could be to do with health. I mean, I had so many clients who have, fear of dying or fear of falling ill or things like that. And that could be to do with the fact that when they were little, somebody in the family was ill, but also it could be that they were ill, they were taken into hospital and they had a really bad experience. There could be so many things. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. But the point is that the field of psychoneuroimmunology, which basically is a science that talks about the interaction and researches the interaction between psychological processes and our immune function and our hormonal function. Basically, what it essentially teaches us is that if we go through lives having sort of positive emotional responses and positive behaviors, and we just basically happy people, content people, then our immune function will respond and our hormonal function will respond accordingly. And likewise, if we go through life in this constant, all this sort of little anxieties, things in the back of your mind that are sort of eating away at you all the time, when you're in that situation, that's going to have a negative impact on your immune function, your hormonal function, and obviously the rest of the system. So there is a whole entire body of science that researches those interactions. But the point is that if we take out the garbage, as I say, and really address the emotional toxicity, like I said, there's those symptoms, there are always symptoms, there's always a reason why we're feeling what we're feeling. Then we can create a completely different reality for us, not just in terms of health, but to do with any other aspect, whether it's relationships or finances or anything else. So it changes everything. It really changes everything. And unfortunately, it's not the first thing that people go to. It's usually the last thing that people look at addressing. Everybody kind of instinctively know, if I'm not well, I should probably look into my diet. I should probably exercise more. I should probably sleep, clean up my sleep hygiene or whatever. But this is that one area that, people kind of drag their feet a little bit before they address it. And from my point of view and my work and my clinical experience over the years and my own personal experiences, it's really, really fundamental.
Which is a question of taking control, is it not? It's putting it another way, very simply, is taking control, acknowledging what you've just said here, what you've explained here about this mental and this emotional aspect and all these different traumas, and can be, stuff going way back, generational, as you say. And then taking control. It's that, we've done the kind of the hands-on EMF stuff. We've looked at the chemical exposure. We looked at all this kind of thing. We've looked at the nutrition. but you have to look at this also because this is as important, if not more important. Certainly, it depends on what stage of the game you're at, but it seems as though there is a stage of the game where, what I'm saying is a stage in your healing path, in your evolutionary process, where this is just the most important thing. Looking at this and dealing with this is the most important thing. And so perhaps we could talk about how to deal with it. What we can do in terms of solutions. Perhaps you could give us your top tools, your 3 top tools for dealing with this.
Sure, absolutely. So basically, what I was sort of mentioned earlier, but I didn't clarify this fully. So electromagnetic hypersensitivity, what you have to be thinking of, you're in a state of hypervigilance. You're constantly hyperactivated. What that means is that your sympathetic nervous system, so the flight and fight and freeze, is in constant overdrive. So let's just clarify that. Why is that relevant? It's relevant because you will never heal unless you're in rest and digest and heal response, which is the other side of the immune system. Because when you think about it from the evolutionary point of view, and this is important for people to understand, is that the sympathetic and parasympathetic, there are 2 different branches of the nervous system. They never operate at the same time. It's you either in one or in the other, which means that if you constantly hyperactivated because of EMF exposure, because of chemicals, because of toxic thoughts and emotions, then the body will remain in the disease state because you're not creating the right environment to heal. And in order to create the right environment for body to heal and to regenerate the tissues, you need to spend more of your time in the rest and digest. So in order to stimulate this parasympathetic tone, there's obviously loads and loads of tools out there. A lot of them are technology-based because there's all sorts of different apps that people can have on mobile phones. So I'm going to stay away from those because I actually want you to know that you can do this without technology, and it's absolutely possible.
Of course, before cell phones came along, everybody was doing it without them. So yeah, I'm sure we can manage without them.
Yeah, absolutely. But in particular, when people hear that meditation is good for them, and they're not really sure, they've never done it before, they're not really sure what to do, so they'll go and download an app to get some guidance, or even the sort of ready-made guided meditations that they can follow. So that's really what people tend to do these days. But even if you're completely new to this, if you haven't done anything like this before, all you need to be thinking is that periodically through the day, that's my prescription for you, periodically through the day, you want to be bringing yourself from this hyperactivated state into the nice, calm, relaxed state. And so there's a number of things you can do. So first of all, very super simple, really super simple, is the deep belly breathing. And to be honest, even if you spend a few minutes doing that, you are having an effect. Trust me, because what happens with the deep belly breathing, when you inhale slowly and fully and you send the air right into your belly, and it's almost like inflating the belly, right? Nice and relaxed. And then you exhale fully. What that actually does is stimulates the vagus nerve, and it actually basically biologically forces the body to switch into the parasympathetic. The reason for that is because when you know yourself, when you're stressed out and when you're in this fight and flight, your breathing is very shallow and superficial, right? So when you then start breathing deeply, you're actually telling your brain, hey, things are good, I'm safe. That's very important. So when you set yourself up to do your breathing exercises, you can do this anywhere, anytime. People don't even, they're not even going to realize you're doing it. But the point is that it's important to basically just scan your environment and make sure that you're safe. And you say to yourself, I'm safe. And then you're halfway there, because the body counts right down. And then we can actually create some positive changes physiologically. So that would be one thing. And I would actually encourage people to do this regularly throughout the day. So you constantly, every hour, every couple of hours, bring yourself right down. And so you induce healing that way. There is an excellent modality that I use a lot. It's become one of my go-to. I'm trained in so many different mind modalities, but this has become one of my go-to modalities, even when working with severe emotional trauma. And that is very simple. So I'd like to quickly demo this. Very simple because there is no sequence. There's nothing to remember apart from the fact that you stroke your arms like this, in this manner, from the top of the shoulder to the elbow. And again, as you're doing that, just remember to focus on your breath and slow your breathing right down. You can do both at the same time. And just doing that for a few minutes. So that's one side. The other side is the face. So it's just like washing the face, really. It's very, very simple, right? And then the third one is rubbing your hands like this. You don't have to do all three. You don't have to do them in sequence. You do whichever one suits you, or you alternate between them. Either way is fine. But this is a super powerful psychosensory technique. It's got a solid neuroscientific basis. It's called havening. And if you want to read up more about it, then go to havening.org. That's havening as in haven, safe place. And you can read up all the science behind it. But I am telling you, as a practitioner of many, many years of experience in this, it's super powerful. And even a few minutes, what it actually does, it changes through stimulating the receptors of the skin. You changing the brain activity, and you inducing delta wave activity in the brain, which is basically the same activity when you experience when you sleep. So even without closing your eyes, without actually falling asleep, you can have that healing effect on the body during the day, because of course healing, that's the whole point. I mean, we heal when we sleep. And so that is another super, super effective. And my third one would be outside, interacting with nature as much as possible. I know how much difference that makes to me and my energy levels, even though I said I function at a very high level these days. But I make point of hiking or running or cycling or doing stuff outside. And whenever you go and connect with nature, we're talking about us being vibrational beings. We have this vibrational frequency. And we are very, very aligned with nature in that respect. So just like EMFs can really mess your vibrational frequency up, nature can restore it. And the healing effect, when you really tune in, it's there. You just need to be receptive to its power. And I absolutely think that's one of the simplest and greatest thing that people can do, even if it's in the middle of the city and it's going to a park. And sitting near a tree or sitting on the grass, stuff like that. If you don't have a beach or mountains nearby, you can still do it. So that would be my top 3 technology-free mind healing tools.
Yeah. Was what the observation I always make when I hear these tools and when I learn about these tools, because I've not heard of this havening before, so that's a new one for me. Is just how simple they are. But obviously they are simple to perform, because if they weren't simple to perform, then we'd be going back into sympathetic mode, wouldn't they? They have to be simple, because we're trying to induce, as you say, this parasympathetic mode. So it has to be like things we can do practically without thinking about them. But we do need to have some focus, and we need to kind of be in the moment and focus, on doing that, and not do all this stuff and thinking about, how you're going to pay your rent at the end of the month or whatever. So perhaps you could share some. I'm curious to know if you've worked with, because I know you work with a lot of clients, patients, and if you work with people that are electrically hypersensitive or have EMF sensitivity, and if you've got any success stories with regard to that, or any kind of major success story that you can share using these tools, so that people can really because I think when you hear these tools, it's like, because what you were explaining before is quite complex about how the brain works, and the tools are very simple. And the thing is, I think people can think, well, the brain is really complex. How can tools so simple actually work? So, any success stories on this?
Yeah, I mean, so we've got a few elements to this question. So first, I'm going to say that what I didn't actually say, and perhaps should have, if you know yourself that you have complex emotional issues that you're struggling with, then what is really worthwhile is to work with somebody, because even in a few sessions, you could have a complete transformation. That is certainly my experience. I'm telling you that those tools really transform. And it's not like in the old days, back in the 80s, where people would go to the psychoanalyst for years on end, 3 times a week, with very little results. Seriously, it's not like that anymore. And the reason why it's not like that, and the reason why those super simple things work, is because we have a much better understanding of neuroscience and how the brain works. So we know that if we, stimulate a certain part of the brain in a certain way, that's the result that we're going to achieve. So therefore, we can bring that right back and say, right, okay, so on a practical level, what could that look like? And this is why those tools are created for people to use every day without being sort of too focused on how it works neuroscientifically. But don't be fooled. Just because it's simple doesn't mean that it's some sort of wishy-washy stuff. No, actually, it's quite the opposite. It's really, really solid stuff. So just wanted to say that, people, don't be, afraid to ask for help, because sometimes, honestly, 3 to 5 sessions, and you could be so equipped to actually just do a little bit of your own work after that. But the major sort of bulk of your trauma could be dealt with very, very quickly with some of those tools that are available. And so in terms of success stories with just healing the mind alone, hundreds, if not, maybe not thousands of these. I haven't really counted them, but it's been a long time. Loads, and we're talking about people not just with OCD or anxiety or depression. No, I'm talking about people who make attempts to end their own lives. People with suicidal thoughts, people who are self-harming. I work with a number of teenagers who are self-harming. So really, really serious issues with identity, and really, really those serious very, very strong urges to harm, and all that can even be resolved. Never mind, obviously PTSD as well. That I should mention that. But in terms of electromagnetic hypersensitivity, because I work with autoimmunity, and people will present, and they will come and present with autoimmune symptoms, and then you get to trying to get to the root cause. You just sort of do your timeline and see, what's been happening to that person, and you're trying to set your priorities in terms of where to look first, etc. So you do this extensive screening at the beginning before you even do any testing. And in a number of cases, people it very much sort of look to me like the main trigger could be the EMFs. But like I said before, that wasn't the only problem. So obviously, encouraging this people to measure, and as you always advise, to measure and mitigate and actually EMF proof their homes in the first instance, and that brings them down and makes a difference. But in order for them to really return to full health, we still need to be looking at those main areas, such as chemicals in their environment and in their food, pathogens of all sorts, parasites, viruses, bacteria, obviously gut health, so microbiome, any sort of dysbiosis that may be going on, any food reactivity that they may have, because if you continue to, if your body continues to react to foods, then you will still have inflammation in the body. You will not quite be where you want to be. And then, of course, the big, massive area of emotional toxicity, as well. So, but that's what I'm stressing that again, because I've actually never met anybody who'd be electromagnetically hypersensitive and that's all there is to it. And there's nothing else going on. Because that hypersensitivity also, when people are hypersensitive to electromagnetic radiation, they will usually, I find, they have hypersensitivity in other areas, be it sound, light, chemicals, smells, all sorts of things like that. And it's for the reason that I explained earlier, is because the whole of the nervous system is operating up here constantly. And so there is a breakdown in the body's sort of defenses. There's a breakdown in terms of the healing processes and the regeneration, because like we said, if the body thinks that you are going to be eaten by a lion, which is what really the fight, flight and freeze, meant back in the day, not anymore, because we sort of constantly stress, but that's really what was created for. When the body thinks that you have a major challenge in terms of danger and you could die potentially, it's not going to be bothered about healing and regeneration. So when you're running away from an angry lion that's going to eat you alive, that's not the priority. So this is once again why the whole system needs to calm right down. The HPE axis needs to be calmed right down in order for the body to go, right, I'm safe now. I'm not running away from an angry lion who wants to eat me. So therefore, I can now focus. There's something not quite right in the body. The body needs healing and regenerating here and there. And that can be now, the energy can be redirected towards that now. So basically, yes, I've definitely had loads of success stories, but I don't just want people to go, oh, I'm okay, I'm coping, it's not too bad. When I'm working with people, I'm really encouraging them to go for it all the way, because they deserve it. They deserve to thrive. They deserve to be at a level of health that actually means that they can do what they want to do in their lives, not just survive and exist and be symptom-free, but kind of, but actually thrive. And in order to achieve that, you need to address all of those other factors as well. And there will be different priorities. For some people, the EMF bit will be massive, and the other bits will just be, tidying things up. And for other people, it could be completely different. It could be that they're more or less the same, it will be the same importance or whatever. So everybody's an individual, but those are the things that we need to be looking at if we want to get to the optimal level and not just exist and survive.
Yeah, so we're running out of time, but perhaps if you could give your top 3 recommendations for somebody who's listening who perhaps is electrically hypersensitive or has this EMF sensitivity, but your top 3 recommendations for somebody who's experiencing symptoms around EMFs.
Well, I actually have been saying this all along, so I'm going to say that once again, because I really think, from my point of view, that's fundamental. What's fundamental is that once you have minimized your EMF exposure, you're going to work on strengthening the whole organism. You're going to work on strengthening the whole body if you want to thrive, that is. So emotional factors, diet, sensitivities, gut microbiome, co-infections, environmental toxicity, and of course, make sure that you've got the right good sleep hygiene and that you actually do exercise, even if it's just a 10-minute walk, if that's all you can do. That you need some movement in your life, because that's strengthening the organism also. It's a very important element. So, and if you need help with that, get it. It's absolutely worth it. It absolutely is worth it. Now, what I want to say, my tip number 2, to go with tip number 1, would be that don't try and do all of those things that I said at the same time, because you end up completely stressed out of your head, completely overwhelmed, and it's going to be counterproductive. So what I encourage you to do is to actually isolate 1 or 2 things that you feel may be the priority for you. And if you're unsure what those priorities are, if you're thinking, well, I don't know what my priorities are, then I would say to downregulate the stress response focus on sleep and focus on emotional toxicity, and even using the tools that I've mentioned. So if you don't know what your priorities are, because you really need to prioritize and go through it, bit by bit, otherwise you're gonna get overwhelmed, then sleep and the emotional stuff, because that's gonna make all of those other factors, the body will perform better already. So it's gonna make all of those other factors easier. And thirdly, this is slightly different, but make sure you don't feel isolated in all this, because EMFs, electromagnetic hypersensitivity, is not very well understood. A lot of people will say that it's all in your head. I don't know what you're going on about. They won't necessarily understand it. They may even be a little bit condescending about it, etc. So what you want to do is make sure that you're not isolated in this, because isolation actually has been found to be worse for your health than smoking. So it's really, really bad to be in that state. Plus, it's chronic stress. If you feel isolated, it's just adding to your chronic stress. So you want to find somebody in your situation, maybe an online community, some sort of support network. You need some sort of support network, and it's going to be much, much easier. Great
tips. Where can people find out more about what you do, Dr. Eva?
So I am at dr.eva.com. dia-eva.com is my main hub. For anybody who's interested in the emotional aspects, I do a lot of online events, and I have done already 2 online events like this one, dedicated entirely to the mind-body connection with all sorts of methodologies. So that's in the region of 70, speakers sharing all sorts of information on this subject, and myself, obviously. So check that out, and just remember that you can heal. We are programmed for survival. The body is programmed to regenerate. And all we need to do is we need to make sure that we create the right environment for it to be able to do what it's always been designed to do. So that's just my final message.
Yeah, it's been fascinating talking to you today, Dr. Eva. It's lots of really in-depth knowledge, and then just some very hands-on tips which people can use. So thank you so much for sharing that. Thanks also for the great work you're doing, because I know you've done similar events more on this mind-body connection, as you say, which is helping a lot of people. Thanks for that, and thanks for being on the EMF Health Summit.
Well, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure sharing this and talking to you and to people. I really do. I do get frustrated when I see people suffering for no reason. There's always so much we can do to get better. So never take no for an answer. If somebody tells you, oh, there's nothing you can do, forget that. There's always something you can do. I can promise you that. So always keep digging a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper, and you find it eventually. So yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Never give up. Yeah. And for all of you who've joined us today, thank you for being part of this movement. My name is Lloyd Borrell. Stay tuned for the next session. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.